Have you ever wanted an aggressive deck that never runs out of steam? Meet the €50 enchantment engine that keeps drawing cards and hits like a truck. Ellivere of the Wild Court. Ellivere is a 4-mana Selesnya commander that turns every small creature into a massive threat and every cheap enchantment into card advantage. Whenever she enters or attacks, she creates a Virtuous Role token and attaches it to another creature we control. These tokens might seem innocent, but they scale like crazy. Each one gives the enchanted creature +1/1 for each enchantment we control. And since these tokens are also enchantments, they also count themselves. So that small little elvish mystic you have sitting on the board now turns into a 4/4, a 6/6, an 8/8, all depending on the amount of enchantments we control. There is one important thing to note about these role tokens. A creature can only have one role attached to it at any given time. So you can't just keep stacking role tokens on one single creature. But in this deck, that's not really a downside. We're going wide anyways, and we will always have different creatures to enchant with these tokens. On top of Ellivere generating these insane role tokens, she also generates us pure value. Whenever an enchanted creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Suddenly, every cheap enchantment we cast becomes a way to buff our creatures and refuel our hand. This deck is built around a ton of efficient, low-cost creatures that draws a card whenever we play an enchantment or whenever one enters the battlefield under our control. Most fast aggro decks suffer from the same classic problem. They empty their hand by turn 5 and then they're just top decking. In this list, every enchantment we play will draw us cards, ensuring we never run out of gas. You're constantly chaining cheap enchantments into more card draw and more pressure. It's a value loop that honestly is really hard to keep up with for your opponents. I was doing research for Ellivere and I saw that the top 20 most viewed decks on Moxfield all were CEDH stacks lists. These are some really expensive lists that use stacks enchantments to just lock down the board and then they use Ellivere as a win condition. And sure, that works, but it's boring and it's kinda missing the point. So I decided to do the right thing. Make a hyper budget €50 list. This is one of the most potent and efficient hyper budget lists I've ever featured on the channel. For just €50 you get a deck that snowballs hard, applies pressure real fast, and keeps your hand full the whole time. The game plan of this deck is really simple but really effective. In the early turns we'll be casting a ton of low cost Enchantress creatures, the ones that draw you cards whenever you play an enchantment. Then we're gonna be buffing up these creatures with some cheap enchantments, and everyone we cast will draw us a card. Then we want to drop Ellivere and start buffing up our creatures with some Virtuous Role tokens. And these tokens will push the stats of our creatures through the roof. Then we swing in, connect, and Ellivere will draw us a ton of cards. This isn't just a fun Enchantress deck, it's enchantment beatdown that punches way above its €50 price tag. Now that you know what the game plan of this deck is, let's break down how I decided to build Ellivere. As per usual, I will be going over every single card that's included in the deck and explaining why I decided to include it. This video is divided up in 7 categories: the value creatures, the draw engines, the enchantments and auras, acceleration, protection and interaction, the lands, and in the end I also have a lengthy upgrade section where I will be mentioning cards that you can include in the deck if you don't care about the budget and want to push this deck even further. Let's start by going over the value creatures. These are the creatures that bring synergy, pressure and utility. Jukai Naturalist. It's a 2-mana 2/2 lifelink enchantment creature and he has a really simple passive ability. The cost of any enchantment we play is reduced by 1 generic mana. In this deck we play a total of 43 enchantments, so this creature will always provide you with a ton of value in the form of cost reduction. And he is also an enchantment himself, meaning whenever we play him, he will also trigger all our Enchantress creatures and draw us a card. He will also count towards our total enchantment count for the Virtuous Role tokens. The fact that this dude has lifelink makes him into a perfect target for any of our power boosting enchantments. Whenever we swing with him, we will be able to gain a ton of life, which is always a nice little benefit. Transcendent Envoy, a 2-mana 1/2 flying enchantment creature, and he has a really similar ability to the previous card. All aura spells we cast will have their mana cost reduced by 1 generic mana. We play a total of 26 auras, so this dude will always provide you some insane value. Like the previous card, this card is also an enchantment, so it synergizes perfectly with Ellivere and all the other cards we play in this deck. A perfect target to buff up with any enchantment, since he does have flying and it it will be easier to deal combat damage to players. Hero of Auras. This 2 mana creature also reduces the cost of any auras we play by 1 generic mana. He also has the heroic ability, meaning whenever we cast a spell that targets Hero of Auras, he will gain a +1/+1 counter, acting as both a cost reducer for any aura we play and a huge scaling body that your opponents will have to deal with, or they will just lose the game to a huge Hero of Auras. Destiny Spinner, a 2 mana 2/3 enchantment creature. As long as this creature is on the battlefield, all your creature and enchantment spells can't be countered. This card is just an absolute nightmare for control players that rely on counter magic, since 95% of the cards in this deck are creatures or enchantments. This ability alone would be enough to include the card in the deck, but she even has an activated ability. For 4 mana, we can turn target land we control into an XX elemental creature with trample and haste, X being the number of enchantments we control. This ability is just perfect to close out games with, since later in the game we will be controlling somewhere between 10 to 15 enchantments, and you can start turning your lands into 15/15 trample haste creatures. Then you can just swing them at any opponent and they will be taken out of the game. And as the ultimate cherry on top, Destiny Spinner also is an enchantment herself. Light Boss. Emperor's Voice. This honestly is probably the most broken card for aura decks ever printed. Whenever we cast an aura spell with Light Paws on the battlefield, we get to search our library for another aura with mana cost equal or less than the aura that just entered the battlefield. Then we get to put it onto the battlefield and attach it to Light Paws. The value on this ability honestly is just beyond broken in this type of deck. Let's say you have Light Paws on the battlefield and you cast an Ancestral Mask, which is already in itself a really crazy aura. We can then search our library for any aura that costs 3 or less mana and attach it to Light Paws. If you need some damage, just go tutor up on all that glitters. If you desperately need some lands, just get a 1 with nature, attach it to Light Paws, and you can ramp your mana. As you can see, Light Paws really is one of the most versatile cards in this deck and will be able to provide you with a ton of value and allow you to get the cards you need at the given board state. If you want to play any deck that plays auras, Light Paws really is an auto inclusion. Kataki, War's Wage. I'm not gonna lie, I was inspired by all the Ellivere EDH decks to include this card in the deck. As long as Kataki is on the battlefield, all artifacts will gain a line of text. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 1 generic mana. As most of you know, in modern day Magic, a ton of decks rely on playing artifacts, be it mana rocks, treasure tokens, food tokens, clue tokens, whatever. Kataki just is an absolute nightmare for those decks. If you play against a treasure player and they control 5 treasures, at the beginning of their upkeep they will have to pay 5 mana for them or they have to sacrifice them. If you play against a classic good stuff deck that relies on playing a ton of mana rocks to getting their big creatures out, now at the beginning of every upkeep they will have to tap their mana rocks to pay for Kataki's cost, or they will have to sacrifice their mana rocks. Kataki's ability is just really annoying to deal with, especially on a 2 mana creature that will come down as early as turn 2. And in this deck we're not playing any artifacts ourselves, so this is just a one-sided effect that only your opponents will have to deal with. Champion of Lambhold, a 3 mana 1/1 creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lambhold. Over the course of the game we will be playing a ton of creatures, and every time we do, Champion of the Lambhold just grows in power, which scales perfectly with her first ability. Creatures with less power than Champion of Lambhold can block any creature we control. Basically, this means if Champion of Lambhold is at 5 power, creatures your opponents control with less than 5 power can't block any of your creatures, not just Champion of Lambhold. If you can just attach a Virtuous Role token to this creature and get her to like 8 power or something, she will essentially make all your creatures unblockable, which scales perfectly with Ellivere's ability and will allow us to connect with our enchanted creatures and draw a ton of cards. Or you can just start taking opponents out of the game since all your creatures will be unblockable. It's a really underrated creature in my opinion. Danita Kapashan, Paragon. 3 mana, 2/2 creature with Vigilance, First Strike and Lifelink. The fact that this creature has these 3 keywords make her the perfect target for any of our buffing enchantments or the Virtuous Role tokens. Due to the first strike, she will always win in combat without taking damage herself. Due to the vigilance, we can just attack with her and still use her as a blocker afterwards. And thanks to the lifelink, we will be gaining a ton of life whenever we swing with her or we block with her. And on top of that, she also reduces the cost of any aura spells we play by 1 generic mana. Just a fantastic creature for an aura deck. Danita, new Benelia's Light, the Selesnya version of the previous card. A 3 mana 2/2 body that also has 3 keywords. Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink. Instead of First Strike like the previous card, we got Trample instead. Meaning if we can buff this creature up with the Virtuous Role token or any other enchantments we play, we will always be able to get damage through thanks to the Trample. If we can deal Trample damage with Ellivere on the field, we will also get to draw a card if this creature is enchanted. Once during each of our turns, Danita also allows us to recast an aura card straight from our graveyard. Later in the game, if your opponents did manage to remove any of your creatures or they removed your auras, you will just be able to recast them from your graveyard and start the nightmare all over again. In this deck, we don't play that much recursion for our auras, so you will always have a ton of auras in your graveyard when you're late in the game. And Danita then functions as the perfect recursion engine and a perfect target to actually enchant with auras. Eidolon of Countless Battles, a 3 mana 0/0 enchantment creature. This creature will get +1/1 for each creature and enchantment we control, which honestly is just a perfect match for this deck. Since we are going wide, playing a ton of different creatures, and obviously we will be playing a ton of enchantments. So usually this creature will have somewhere like 10, 15, 20 power. A really huge body your opponents will have to deal with, or they will just instantly lose the game to it. For 4 mana, it also has the Bestow mechanic, meaning when we cast this for 4 mana, we can actually play it as an aura spell attached to a creature we control. That creature will then get the same effect, meaning it will get +1/1 for each creature and enchantment we control. If you do bestow it on a creature and that creature gets removed, Eidolon of Countless Battles doesn't go to the graveyard. It just enters the battlefield as a creature, making it into a really efficient card. If we do cast it for its bestow cost, it actually gets the benefit of the cost reduction of cards like Hero of Iroas, since the card will be an aura when we cast it. Kutzil, Malamet Exemplar. It's a 3 mana 3/3 creature. Whenever this is on the battlefield, opponents can cast any spells during our turn. This effect is really strong, since when it is your turn, you can just do your thing and you don't have to worry about any opponents interacting with you. They can play instant speed spot removal, counter magic, whatever. Now the reason why we play this over an actual Grand Abolisher is the second passive ability. Whenever one or more creatures we control with more power than their base power deal combat damage to an opponent, we get to draw a card. Obviously in this deck, since we do play a ton of auras and we get the Virtuous Role tokens from Ellivere, most of our creatures will have more power than their base power. Whenever they then deal combat damage, we will get to draw a card of Kutzil and a card of Ellivere, since we deal damage with an enchanted creature. Since this card does say one or more opponents, you will want to swing your creatures at different opponents if possible. For example, if you swing 3 enchanted creatures at one single opponent, you will only get to draw 1 card, since Kutzil says 1 or more. If you instead swing 1 enchanted creature at 3 opponents and they all connect, you will get to draw 3 cards of Kutzil. It's just a little fun fact about the cards that say 1 or more opponents. Archon of the Wild Rose, one of the win conditions in this deck. It's a 4 mana 4/4 flying creature. Other creatures that are enchanted by auras who we control will have base stats 4/4 and they will also gain flying. This ability honestly is just insane to close out the game with, since every creature we control that's enchanted by one of our auras or one of the Virtuous Role tokens will get a huge stat boost to its base stats, and they will also gain flying, which means that it's really hard for your opponents to actually block your creatures and prevent the damage they will do and the cards we draw from Ellivere. Oakheim Adversary. If you play in a pot with a ton of players that are playing green, this is one of the best value creatures you'll ever play. It's a 4 mana 2/3 Death Touch body. If an opponent controls a green permanent, its mana cost is reduced by 2 mana, making it into a 2 mana 2/3 Death Touch body with an awesome ability. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. A really good effect on a 2/3 Death Touch body for just 2 mana. The fact that this card has Death Touch makes it so that your opponents don't want to block this creature, since they will lose their blocker when they do so. And if they decide to let it through, not lose their blocker in combat, it deals combat damage to that player, allowing us to draw a card. Toski, a 4 mana, 1/1 legendary creature with a ton of abilities. First up, Toski can't be countered. So you can just cast this and opponents can't interact with this. He will always hit the battlefield. Second ability, Toski has indestructible, meaning you can just swing with him no matter what the blocker is, Toski will always survive. All removal your opponents play or even board wipes that say destroy target creature will not work. They actually have to exile Toski to get rid of him. The third ability, Toski has to attack every combat if able. So if you want to or not, you will always have to swing with Toski on every single one of your turns. This might seem like a downside, but the fact that Toski has indestructible means you will never lose him in combat. And the fourth ability, and the real reason why we play him, whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player with Toski on the battlefield, we get to draw a card. This really just doubles up on the value we already get from Ellivere whenever an enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player. If you also control Toski, every enchanted creature dealing damage to a player will draw you 2 cards, providing you some insane card advantage. Toski really is the perfect creature body to just buff up with a ton of enchantments. And the last card in this section is Karametra, God of Harvests. It's a 5 mana, 6/7 indestructible enchantment creature. As long as your devotion to white and green is less than 7, Karametra will just be an enchantment and not a creature. Devotion basically means the amount of mana pips in permanents you control. Karametra does count her own 2 mana pips, so you only need 5 more green or white mana pips to turn her into a creature. And yeah, a 6/7 indestructible creature body to swing with is actually a pretty big deal. Karametra's passive ability really is one of the most efficient and explosive ramp abilities in the entire game. Whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to search our library for a forest or a plains card. Then we get to put it onto the battlefield tapped. There's a ton of reasons why we play Karametra. A huge indestructible enchantment. She turns into a huge indestructible body we can actually swing with if we have enough devotion. Whenever we cast any of our cheap creatures in the deck, we actually get to ramp by putting lands into play. But the main reason we play this, and my personal favorite reason, later in the game she will actually be doing a huge amount of deck filtering. Just getting all the basic lands out of our deck onto the battlefield and actually reducing the chances that later in the game we draw lands. The less lands you have in the deck, the bigger the chances are you actually draw a useful creature or enchantment off the top. Next up we have the draw engines. These cards are the backbone of our entire strategy. The deck just won't work without them. The draw engines are really efficient creatures that allow us to draw a card whenever we play an enchantment or an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control. They ensure us we never run out of cards, no matter how fast we empty our hand. Curse Spirit Dancer, a 2 mana 0/2 creature. Whenever we cast an aura spell, we get to draw a card. With a creature like this on the battlefield, you can just empty your hands, cast your cheap auras on all creatures you control, and you will never have to worry about running out of cards. Since every cheap enchantment will turn in some sort of a cantrip, replacing itself by drawing you a new card. And Curse Spirit Dancer will get +2/2 for each aura attached to it. As you can imagine, in an aura deck, this creature's power and toughness gets out of hand really fast, especially if you can get a Virtuous Role token attached to this. This card is probably the second best card draw engine in the deck. The best card draw engine in the deck is Cities, Harvest's Hand, a 2 mana 1/2 enchantment creature. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we gain 1 life and we get to draw a card. Now, why do I say that this card is better than Curse Spirit Dancer? It's not because of the life gain, that's just a nice little added benefit that Cities gives us. But it is the fact that Cities herself is also an enchantment and she will count towards our total enchantment count for the Virtuous Role tokens. And whenever we play Cities and we have any other draw engine on the field, we will also be able to draw a card whenever we cast her. If you want to build an enchantment based deck in Selesnya colors, Cities is the first card I'd include. Nessian Wanderer, a 2 mana 1/3 creature. This card doesn't really allow us to draw cards, but really it does. He has the constellation mechanic, meaning whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, it triggers. We get to look at the top 3 cards of our library, reveal a land card from amongst them and put it into our hand. The other 2 cards go to the bottom of our library. So he doesn't directly draw us cards, but he does allow us to filter our deck. Since the odds of you hitting a land in the top 3 cards of your deck are like 70%, you will always be able to just add a card from the deck to your hand. And the best part about this card is that the constellation mechanic triggers whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, not when we cast it. So if you play or attack with Ellivere and create a Virtuous Role token, the constellation mechanic will trigger and you will be able to get a land from the deck to your hand. Fantastic card that I didn't see included in any other Ellivere lists. Season of Growth, a 2 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to scry 1, meaning we can look at the top card of our library and we can decide to place it on the bottom or just leave it on top. Scrying is a pretty solid mechanic that gives you some control over the next card you draw. If there's a land on top and you don't need any more lands, you can just scry to the bottom and you will be able to draw another card. And the second ability, whenever we cast a spell that targets a creature we control, we get to draw a card. So whenever we play any aura that targets one of our creatures, we will get to draw a card, just acting as another draw engine. Enchantress Presence, a 3 mana enchantment that basically has some sort of an Enchantress effect, allowing us to draw a card whenever we cast another enchantment. It's not as good as having this ability on a creature body we can actually enchant and swing with, but it's still a pretty nice addition to the deck and a really solid draw engine whenever we cast any of our cheap auras. And remember, you can just stack up these effects. If you have cities on the field and Enchantress Presence, whenever you cast a cheap aura spell, you will draw 2 cards, just granting you some insane card advantage. Mesa Enchantress, Verduran Enchantress, and Satyr Enchanter. All 3 of these are 3 mana creature bodies that will allow us to draw a card whenever we cast an enchantment spell. All these creatures are very efficient, low-cost draw engines that we can actually start enchanting and swinging with. We can even start buffing them up with the Virtuous Role tokens, and whenever they deal combat damage to a player, they will draw us cards. The reason this deck works as well as it does is because we can play this many Enchantress creatures that draws a card whenever we play an enchantment. Pearl Ear, Imperial Advisor, a 3 mana, 3/4 lifelink body, which in itself is already a really good stat line. If we can enchant this, we will be gaining a ton of life when we swing with him. Passively, he also gives all our enchantment spells affinity for auras, meaning that all our enchantments will cost 1 mana less per aura we control. This is just an insane cost reduction ability, since every Virtuous Role token counts, every aura we control counts, and all our enchantments will lose all their generic mana costs. Mantle of the Ancients, which usually costs 5 mana, if you just control 3 simple auras, will turn into a 2 mana enchantment, which honestly is a pretty good deal. And it doesn't stop there. There's a reason why he is in the card draw engine section. Whenever we cast an aura that targets a modified creature we control, we get to draw a card. A modified creature is a creature that has +1/+1 counters on it, equipment attached to it, or an aura attached to it. As you can imagine, in this deck, all our creatures will be modified by being buffed by auras or by +1/+1 counters. And Pearl Ear just sets up some sort of a value loop. You cast an aura on a modified creature, you get to draw a card, you control an aura, so the cost of that card is reduced, you play that one, draw a new card, and you can just keep going until you're out of mana. Pretty insane creature for an aura deck. Cetacean Champion, a 3 mana, 1/3 creature with the constellation mechanic. When an enchantment enters, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Cetacean Champion and we get to draw a card. Whenever we play an enchantment or we even create a Virtuous Role token, it will trigger. It will gain +1/+1 counters, turning into a huge body your opponents will have to deal with, and it will also draw us a ton of cards. Auto inclusion in any Enchantress deck. Tanglespan Lookout, a 3 mana, 2/3 creature that will draw us a card whenever an aura enters the battlefield under our control. So if we play an aura, we get to draw a card, or if we create a Virtuous Role token with Ellivere, we also get to draw a card. And the last card in this section is Eidolon of Blossoms. It's a 4 mana, 2/2 enchantment creature, and it also has the best mechanic in this deck, Constellation. Whenever this card or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card. So when it enters, it already replaces itself by drawing a card. If we play any enchantment, we also get to draw a card. If we create Virtuous Role tokens, we also get to draw a card. And this card is an enchantment creature itself, so it will trigger all our other enchantment synergies. Pretty sick value. Before we continue in the section you've all been waiting for, the enchantments and auras section, if you like this type of content and you want to support me and the channel, check out the YouTube membership program. All members will get access to sneak peeks of the content I plan on doing, exclusive chat rooms in the Panzer MTG Discord server where you can vote on what commander I will be doing this type of video on next, exclusive Panzer emojis you can use anywhere on Discord and YouTube, and at the highest tier you can even submit your decklist for review by me. If you want to check it out, click the join button or check out the link in the description below. Big love to all the current YouTube members. Your support is truly appreciated. Next up, and probably the most important section, is the enchantments and auras section. This is our toolbox of enchantments and auras. Buffs, keywords, evasion, protection, these enchantments and auras do it all. And the more we cost, the bigger our creatures get and the more cards we get to draw. Ethereal Armor, one of the most cost-effective stat boosting auras ever printed. It gives the enchanted creature +1/1 for each enchantment we control, functioning in the same way as the Virtuous Role tokens. What makes this card so good is the fact that it only costs 1 mana. And it also gives the enchanted creature first strike, meaning if your opponents have some death touch blockers or some huge power creatures to block with, your creature will just deal damage first, win combat, and you won't receive any damage back. Hyena Umbra, a 1 mana aura that gives the enchanted creature +1/1 and first strike. The same as with the previous card, it will ensure your creature deals damage first and you won't take any damage back in combat. And this enchantment also has the Totem Armor mechanic. Totem Armor basically means whenever the enchanted creature would be destroyed, we get to remove all damage for it and destroy this aura instead. Totem Armor is just a perfect way to protect your creatures from removal. If you have a creature on the battlefield with a Totem Armor card attached to it and an opponent plays a spot removal spell destroying the creature will just stay on the battlefield and the Totem Armor card will be destroyed instead. If an opponent plays a board wipe destroying all the creatures enchanted by auras with Totem Armor will survive. The auras with Totem Armor will be removed instead. Totem Armor just is a really potent mechanic for an aura-based deck to actually protect your creatures. One with nature. Whenever a creature enchanted by this 1 mana aura deals combat damage to a player, we get to search our library for a basic land card and put it into play tapped. This honestly is one of the best auras in the entire deck. Because whenever you connect with a creature, you actually get to ramp your mana and you get to filter basic lands out of your deck, reducing the chances that you will draw land cards and increasing the chances that you actually draw some useful cards. And it's not just a one-time effect. As long as you can keep connecting with a creature enchanted with this, every single time you will get to ramp and filter your deck. Sixth Sense, another 1 mana aura card. Whenever a creature enchanted by this deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. This effect just stacks perfectly with all the Enchantress cards we play in the deck and with Ellivere's trigger, giving us even more card advantage. Rancor, my favorite aura card of all time. This 1 mana spell gives enchanted creature +2/0 and trample. As you know by now, we will be able to get our creatures to insane amounts of power by using the Virtuous Role tokens and controlling a ton of enchantments. If an opponent is just spawning a ton of 1/1 tokens, this doesn't actually matter since they will just keep chum blocking your huge creature bodies. Just enchant them with Rancor, give them trample, and you will always get combat damage through. And the absolute best part and the reason why I love Rancor so much is the second ability. Whenever Rancor would be put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we get to return it to our hand. So if you do have this enchanted on a really huge creature and your opponent can actually remove the creature by destroying it, exiling it, bouncing it, whatever, Rancor won't go to the graveyard. It will actually just return to our hand. We can just cast it again, draw a new card of all of our Enchantress effects, and boost another creature's power by 2 and give it trample. Rancor is just a power boosting trample giving nightmare that keeps coming back and your opponents will barely have any opportunity to deal with it. Reconnaissance, a 1 mana enchantment with an activated ability that costs 0 mana, meaning you can activate this at any time on instant speed without paying anything. When we activate this ability, we get to remove a creature we control that's attacking from combat and we get to untap it. Now, why would we play this? It's simple. It's just a great card with Ellivere. Let's say you have Ellivere on the field, which is a 4/4 body, and all your opponents have like 10/10 creatures to block with. Obviously, we still want to be swinging to create the Virtuous Role tokens, but if we would, Ellivere just gets blocked by a 10/10 creature and we lose her. With Reconnaissance, we can just swing with Ellivere, get the trigger, get to create a Virtuous Role token, activate Reconnaissance, remove her from combat, and they won't have the opportunity to block her. We just get the attack trigger and then remove her from combat before we go to blockers. Reconnaissance just basically ensures we can keep swinging with Ellivere no matter what the board state is. And if, for example, you would swing into an opponent and they do have combat tricks giving all their creatures death touch with a Vault of the Archangel or something, just untap all your creatures, remove them from combat, and they will all be fine. Reconnaissance really has a ton of uses in any game. You'd actually be surprised. Hidden Guerrillas. This is by far the oldest card in the deck. It's a 1 mana enchantment that doesn't do anything, unless an opponent plays an artifact. When they do, this enchantment turns into a 5/3 creature with trample. 1 mana for a 5/3 trampled creature we can start buffing with any of Auroras is a really solid deal. You can basically view this card as a 1 mana 5/3 creature with trample, since in modern day Magic, players will be using artifacts. Be it Sol Rings, Mana Rocks, Phyrexian Altars, every deck plays artifacts. If you play this on turn 1, I can guarantee you by the time it's your turn 2, someone will have played a Mana Rock and it will be a 5/3 creature you can actually swing with. Small little note on this card, whenever it turns into a 5/3 creature, it won't count as an enchantment anymore. It will lose the enchantment type, so it won't count towards your Virtuous Role tokens anymore. All that glitters. This 2 mana aura will boost the power and toughness of the creature it's enchanted onto by 1/1 for each artifact and enchantment we control. We don't play any artifacts in this deck, but this card just functions as a 2 mana Virtuous Role token, resulting in a huge power boost to the creature that this is enchanted onto. A Tale for the Ages, some sort of a 2 mana aura card for our deck. As long as this is on the battlefield, all of our enchanted creatures will get +2/2. Since in this deck we want to be going wide and play as much creatures as possible and each get them enchanted for the Ellivere draw trigger, this card will always provide a really huge stat boost to your entire board. Really efficient card, and it fits the strategy that we actually want to do in this deck perfectly. Feather of Flight, a 2 mana aura with flash, meaning we can play it on instant speed. Whenever it enters a battlefield, we get to draw a card, functioning somewhat as a cantrip aura, replacing itself by drawing us a card. The enchanted creature will get +1/0 and flying. If, for example, an opponent is swinging at you with a flying creature and they think you can't block it, just flash this in, give one of your creatures flying and you can block it. If your opponents have a really big board and you can't get any damage through, just buff this onto one of the creatures you control, give it flying, and you can just fly over their blockers. Really simple, but really efficient card. Spirit Mantle. This card will give the enchanted creature +1/1 and protection from creatures. Protection from creatures basically makes it so that our creature can't be blocked. So +1/1 and unblockable for just 2 mana. If your opponents have a creature with an ability that would target one of your creatures, this will also not work. Let's say you have Ellivere on the field with Spirit Mantle attached to her and an opponent plays a Ravenous Chupacabra, a creature that destroys a creature whenever it enters the battlefield. Thanks to Spirit Mantle, they will have to pick a different target, since Ellivere will not be able to be targeted by a creature's ability. Sterling Grove, a 2 mana enchantment that I'm testing out in this deck. Passively, it will give all other enchantments we control Shroud, meaning that these enchantments can be targeted by any spells or abilities. Let's say an opponent plays a Witch Enchanter trying to remove one of your enchantments, they just can't, since they can't target it because they will have Shroud. A really solid way to protect all enchantments from spot removal. Shroud also means that we ourselves can target our own enchantments with anything. The reason I mentioned I'm testing out this card is because we play some enchantment creatures in this deck, and with this on the battlefield we actually can target them and buff them with any of our auras or Virtuous Role tokens. So it's quite experimental in this deck and actually does have some downside to playing it. For 1 mana and sacrificing this enchantment, we get to search our library for any other enchantment card and put it on top, functioning as some sort of an enchantment tutor. Pretty solid way to just tutor up the enchantment you need at that given board state and ensure you will draw it next turn. In a 100 card singleton format like Commander, tutors will always be fantastic. Ancestral Mask, one of the biggest power boosting auras we play in the deck. The enchanted creature will get +2/2 for each other enchantment in play. If we control only 4 other enchantments and we then play this card, the creature that's enchanted with this will get +10/10, which is an insane stat boost for just 3 mana. But let me read the card again. Enchanted creature gets +2/2 for each other enchantment in play. So this card even counts our opponent's enchantments. If someone controls one of the Teros Gods, a Smothering Tide, a Rhystic Study, our creatures will also get an additional +2/2 for each enchantment they control. If you're tutoring up an enchantment from your deck and you do need the biggest power boosting aura in the deck, Ancestral Mask will always be the target. It's just that efficient. Armadillo Cloak and Unflinching Courage. These two cards have different names, but they basically have the same effect. They give the enchanted creature +2/2, lifelink, and trample. Pretty good stat boost for 3 mana. The lifelink ensures we will be gaining a ton of life when our creatures have a huge amount of power. So if you are under a ton of pressure, the life gain is always a nice little effect, just keeping you in the game for longer. Because in this deck, you usually will be attacking with all your creatures all the time and you won't have any blockers left. And as mentioned with the previous cards, trample in this deck is an absolute must. Since you can grow a creature to 40/40 power using the Virtuous Role tokens Ancestral Mask, but as long as you don't have trample on those creatures, you won't be able to get damage through. Your opponents will just use 1/1 squirrel tokens to block your immensely huge creature, and it won't even matter that you attacked with it. You won't get any damage through, and you won't get a trigger of Ellivere drawing you cards. Both these cards give fantastic value in the form of power and 2 really efficient keywords for this type of deck. Duelist's Heritage. This 3 mana enchantment will make sure that whenever we attack, one of our creatures will get Double Strike. And Double Strike has a ton of uses in this deck. If you swing with an enchanted creature with Ellivere on the field, Double Strike will make sure you deal damage twice and you will draw 2 cards of Ellivere's trigger. Swing with a creature that has 1 with nature attached to it and you deal combat damage twice, you will be able to get 2 basic lands from your deck onto the battlefield. You have Ellivere at 11 power and an opponent can block her, just give her Double Strike and you will deal 22 commander damage. 21 commander damage is enough to win the game. Don't underestimate how powerful Double Strike really can be, especially combined with keywords like Trample, which this card gives. Garruk's Uprising. This 3 mana enchantment will give all creatures we control Trample. Whenever Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield and we control a creature with 4 or more power, we get to draw a card. If this enchantment is on the battlefield and we play a creature with 4 or more power, we also get to draw a card. Honestly, in this deck, we don't play that many creatures with 4 or more power. But our commander, Ellivere, does have 4 power. So you can cast Garruk's Uprising before you play Ellivere, and you will draw a card whenever you cast her. Or when you already control Ellivere and you play Garruk's Uprising, you get to draw a card. Pretty solid that the card that gives all our creatures the most relevant keyword in the deck, Trample, also replaces itself by drawing you at least 1 card. Shield of the Oversoul, a 3 mana aura that will give bonuses depending on the colors the enchanted creature has. As long as the enchanted creature is green, it will get +1/1 and indestructible. As long as the creature is white, that creature will get +1/1 and flying. These effects are pretty underwhelming for 3 mana if you attach them to a mono-colored creature. But if you can enchant one of our Selesnya creatures in the deck with this card, so a creature that's both green and white, the creature will get +2/2, flying and indestructible, which is a really good deal for just 3 mana. And obviously the main target for this will be our commander, Ellivere. If you can just give her indestructible, you can just keep swinging with her every single turn without worrying about ever losing her, and you will be able to create a ton of Virtuous Role tokens. Strength of the Harvest, one of the Modern Horizons MDFC lands. It's a 3 mana aura that will give a creature +1/1 for each creature and enchantment we control. Same effect as Eidolon of Countless Battles. As I mentioned there, we will be controlling a ton of creatures and enchantments at all times, so this will result in a huge stat boost. And if you don't need the aura for some reason and you desperately need a land, you can just flip the card, play the backside, which is a land that enters tapped and taps for a white or a green mana. There really is no downside to playing an MDFC card in this type of deck. Unquestioned Authority. This card is basically Spirit Mantle, but as a sort of cantrip. For 1 mana more, we get an aura that gives a creature protection from creatures. So it basically makes it unblockable. And whenever it enters a battlefield, it also replaces itself by drawing us a card. For 3 mana, this is still pretty solid value. Indomitable Might, a 4 mana aura with flash. The enchanted creature will get +3/3 and it will be able to assign its combat damage as though it wasn't blocked. So whenever you swing with a creature with this enchanted onto it and an opponent decides to block it, you can actually choose to deal damage to the blocking creature or directly to the player. This enchantment also gives some sort of unblockable effect. Really solid way to just get damage through and get some Ellivere triggers. Unblockable effects are just really good in a deck that will buff creatures to immense amounts of power. Sage's Reverie, one of the more expensive aura cards in the deck. When we play this card and attach it to a creature, we get to draw a card for every aura that is already attached to that creature. And this card also counts itself, so when you play this, you will always be drawing at least one card. But as you could have guessed, the main use of this card is whenever you control a creature with a ton of auras already attached to it, you just enchant this onto the creature and you will be able to draw a ton of cards. Passively, this card will also give the enchanted creature +1/1 for each other aura we control, just boosting the already creature stats even further. If you just have a simple creature with a Virtuous Role token attached to it and you enchant this onto it, the value is already really good. It gets +2/2 and you get to draw 2 cards. Not too shabby for 4 mana. And the last and most expensive aura in the deck is Mantle of the Ancients. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, we get to return all auras in our graveyard to the battlefield attached to the creature this is attached to. So later in the game, if you had some combat phases, some removal was played and we have like 4 auras in our graveyard, just play this card and all of them will be returned to the battlefield attached to that creature. A perfect tool later in the game to just recur all the auras you have lost over the course of the game to the battlefield. We barely play any other recursion in this deck, so usually in the later stages of the game there will be at least some auras in your graveyard. And this card also gives the enchanted creature +1/1 for each enchantment we control, which will result in a huge stat boost because it instantly attaches a ton of auras to it whenever it enters the battlefield. Next up we have the acceleration section. We play a mix of classic mana dorks and enchantment based acceleration, just so we can get Ellivere and any of our value creatures out as soon as possible. Wild Growth, a 1 mana enchant land card. Whenever the enchanted land is tapped for mana, the controller of that land gets to add an additional 1 green mana to their mana pool. This basically enchants a land and you will be able to tap it for 2 mana. If you can play a forest on turn 1, tap it, enchant this card onto the forest. Next turn, play another land, you will have access to 3 mana, just accelerating us. And since this card is an enchantment, it will trigger all our Enchantress creatures and actually draws a card later in the game if we play it. Utopia Sprawl, a pretty similar card to Wild Growth. It's a 1 mana enchant forest card, so we can't enchant this onto any land. The land actually has to be a forest. Then when this enters the battlefield, we have to choose a color. When that land is then tapped for mana, we get to add 1 mana of that color to our mana pool, just making sure that land also taps for 2 mana, accelerating us by 1 turn. Arbor Elf, a 1 mana dork that allows us to untap target forest. This card does way more than untap a forest and allowing us to tap it again for 1 additional mana in a turn. If you, for example, have a forest with Wild Growth attached to it, you can just tap it for 2 mana, tap Arbor Elf, untap the forest, and then tap it for 2 mana again, resulting in a total of 4 mana from 1 land. We do play a ton of other enchant land cards in this deck that actually allow our forest to produce more than 1 mana. And Arbor Elf really just doubles up on the value of any of those cards. Avacyn's Pilgrim, a 1 mana 1/1 creature that we can tap to add 1 white mana to our mana pool, functioning as a simple mana dork that will accelerate our mana by 1 turn. I chose to include this creature for another reason than it being a mana dork, and that is the fact that it's just a 1/1 body. Later in the game, if we don't need the mana it produces anymore, we can actually use this as a creature to start buffing it with auras and start swinging with it. The more enchanted creatures we control, the better. Fertile Ground. This is basically a worse Wild Growth, doing the same thing but for 1 mana more. For 2 mana, we get to enchant a land, and whenever that land is tapped for mana, we get to add an additional mana of that type to our mana pool. Wolf Willow Haven. And this is Fertile Ground, but better. For 2 mana, we get to enchant a land. Whenever we tap that land, we get to add an additional 1 green mana to our mana pool. And on top of that, for 5 mana, we can also sacrifice this enchantment to create a 2/2 wolf token. You'll probably never be using this activated ability since we do want as many enchantments on the board as possible, but if an opponent is about to swing at you and you don't have any blockers, you can just sacrifice it, create a 2/2 wolf, and you will be fine. Do be aware though, this ability can only be activate it on your own turn. So if an opponent is attacking you during their turn, you can't just create a wolf on instant speed and block with it. And the last and the absolute best card in the acceleration section is Sanctum Weaver. It's a 2 mana 0/2 enchantment creature. The fact that this card is an enchantment creature is really crazy. Whenever we play this with an Enchantress creature on the field, we will get to draw a card. It will count towards our total enchantment count for the Virtuous Role tokens. And its activated ability adds mana of any color to our mana pool equal to the amount of enchantments we control. Yeah, you read that right. It's absolutely busted. Baseline, this creature will always tap for 1 mana, since it is an enchantment itself. If you only control 2 additional enchantments, which is really easy to do in this deck, you have a 2 mana mana dork that taps for 3 mana, which is insane. Later in the game, if you control like 10 enchantments, which is honestly in this deck not hard to do at all, this 2 mana creature will tap for 10 mana. Sanctum Weaver is an absolutely broken mana dork, especially in this type of deck. If you like this content, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon, just like Ellivere will hit our opponents. Next up, we have the protection and interaction section. Even a budget deck needs answers. As you could have guessed, most of our removal is enchantment based, just to synergize with all the other cards we play in the deck. And aside from the awesome totem armor cards, we play some other protection to actually protect our key creatures. Candidate's Transformation, 2 mana enchant creature spell that draws us a card whenever it enters the battlefield. So it basically replaces itself. The creature enchanted by this card will turn into a 3/3 elk and lose all abilities. Let's say, for example, you're playing versus a Kerenko player, and when he taps him, he's about to make 7 million goblins. Just turn him into an elk and he loses his ability to create goblins. Enchantments that make a creature lose all abilities are really annoying to deal with in the commander format. Let's say, for example, I play a murder on the Kerenko, it just goes to the command zone, the player can cast it later again and just use it again. But with cards like this, Kerenko actually stays on the battlefield and has no abilities. If opponents don't have a way to sacrifice Kerenko, it just stays on the battlefield. They can't make it just go to the command zone, they actually have to lose the creature in combat for them to do so. Enchantments like this can just lock some players out of the game, especially the players that rely on their commander and their activated abilities. Ossification. For 2 mana, we get to enchant target basic land we control. We play 27 basic lands, so we will control a basic land at all times. When Ossification enters the battlefield, we get to exile target creature or planeswalker until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. It's a fantastic 2 mana card to deal with some problematic creatures or planeswalkers. If opponents don't play any enchantment removal, this is just a permanent removal spell for 2 mana. Do be warned, if you use effects like this on someone's commander, they can actually choose to make their commander go to the command zone, and they will be able to cast it again. The card will not be under Ossification until it leaves the battlefield. Sheltered by Ghosts, one of the most awesome uncommon cards in the Duskmourn set. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, we get to exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this aura leaves the battlefield. If you can just enchant this onto a creature and give it like totem armor or indestructible, this is a permanent removal spell for 2 mana. As long as they can't deal with your creature, they won't get their non-land permanent back. And this aura also gives +1/0 and ward 2, a small little stat boost, and if they want to target a creature this is enchanted onto, the opponent will have to pay 2 mana. Warbriar's Blessing, a 2 mana aura that will give the enchanted creature +0/2, a small little toughness boost. Whenever this aura enters the battlefield, the enchanted creature will fight a creature an opponent controls. This basically acts as some sort of a removal spell. Since we are an enchantment deck, we will usually control the biggest creatures. If you want to remove a creature, just play this card on one of your big creatures, then target, for example, an opponent's commander, your big creature and their small little commander will fight, your creature will be victorious, and this just acts as a solid removal spell. And an additional aura to trigger our Enchantress cards and grow our creatures even more. Bridgeworks Battle, a 3 mana sorcery speed spell that will boost the stats of one of our creatures by +2/+2 until the end of turn. Then it fights up to 1 creature we don't control. Another really solid fight card, which is really good with our enchanted creatures, and it acts as some sort of a removal spell. If you don't need removal and you do need a land, you can just play the backside, which is a land that taps for green mana, and you can even make it enter untapped if you pay 3 life, acting as some sort of a basic forest. Chains of Custody, a weaker version of Sheltered by Ghosts. For 3 mana, we get to enchant a creature we control. Then when this enters the battlefield, we get to exile any non-land permanent of an opponent until this card leaves the battlefield. And the enchanted creature will also gain Ward 2, making it just a little harder to target and harder for your opponents to get their non-land permanent back. Grasp of Fate. This 3 mana enchantment is basically Oblivion Ring, but better. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, we get to pick 1 non-land permanent for each opponent and they get exiled until this card leaves the battlefield. So for 3 mana, you get to exile 3 permanents. Way better than the classic Oblivion Ring that just does the same but for 1 permanent, right? Grasp of Fate is a really underrated card in Commander and I'm surprised not more decks are playing this. Umbra Mystic. A 3 mana creature that gives all auras we control totem armor. This card really is the ultimate protection piece for this deck. Let's say you have 5 creatures on the board and all creatures are enchanted, be it by a Virtuous Role token or another aura we control. You then play Umbra Mystic and an opponent decides to play a board wipe. Instead of the creatures dying, you will just have to destroy the auras equipped to them since they will have the totem armor mechanic, resulting in your board almost being immune to spot removal and board wipes. If you can get a Virtuous Role token or another aura attached to Umbra Mystic, this is a really hard creature to actually deal with. I know I'm mentioning the Virtuous Role tokens, these cards are also auras and they will also get totem armor even though they're tokens. Pretty awesome interaction, right? Retether. This 4 mana sorcery speed spell returns all auras from our graveyard to the battlefield. Later in the game, if opponents did manage to remove some of your creatures enchanted with a ton of auras, or if someone played a board wipe that resulted in a ton of auras going to the graveyard, you can just start rebuilding your board with creatures, cast a Retether, and you will get some insane value, returning like 5, 6, 7 auras from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is the ultimate late game get out of jail for free card if you just lost a ton of creatures and auras to a board wipe. And the last card in this section is a Winds of Wrath, a 5 mana board wipe that destroys all creatures that are not enchanted. In this deck, this will be a one-sided board wipe since almost all creatures we control will be enchanted at all times. Later in the game, this just resets the board and your opponents will have to start rebuilding from 0. And when they don't have any creatures on the board left, you can just start swinging with your enchanted creatures, lethaling them out of the game and getting a ton of free Ellivere triggers, drawing you a ton of cards. A one-sided board wipe for just 5 mana is a pretty solid deal. For the lands, we don't play any utility lands since I couldn't find any that fit the €50 budget. We do play a lot of 2-colored lands that barely cost any money and an immense amount of basic lands. Canopy Vista, Fortified Village, Sungrass Prairie, Sun Petal Grove, a Command Tower, 14 Forests and 13 Plains. Since this deck was built on a €50 budget, I do have a pretty lengthy upgrade section. Enchantress decks scale incredibly well with more expensive cards. So if you do want to push this deck further, I'd include any of the following cards. Birds of Paradise, a classic 1 mana dork that we can tap to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. This card is exceptionally good in this deck and not only because it is a mana dork. It is also a flying creature we can start buffing with enchantments and make it really easy to get combat damage through. Giver of Runes and Mother of Runes. Both are 1-drop white creatures that we can tap to give target creature protection of a color of our choice until the end of turn. You can use this effect to give your creatures protection from colored removal spells. You can use this to make your creatures unblockable by creatures of a specific color. And since these are also 1-drop creatures, you can just start enchanting them and start swinging with them. One thing to note about protection from colors is that if you have a creature enchanted with a green aura and you give it protection from green, the aura will actually fall off and you will lose it. So be warned about that. On Thin Ice, a 1 mana enchantment that makes you enchant a snowland you control. When this card enters the battlefield, we get to exile target creature an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. It's not an expensive card by any means, but snowlands do come at quite a hefty price. So if you want to include this card in the deck, which is something I'd absolutely recommend since it is a really efficient removal spell, you will also also have to replace all the basic forests and plains by snow-covered plains and snow-covered forests. Snow-covered lands are also basic lands. So a card like One with Nature that allows you to get a basic land from your deck also allows you to get snow-covered lands from your deck. Serra Ascendant, a 1 mana 1/1 lifelink creature. As long as you have 30 or more life, Serra Ascendant will get +5/5 and flying. And as you all know, in a game of Commander, you start at 40 life. So on turn 1, this creature will actually be a 1 mana 6/6 flying lifelink creature. Pretty solid target to start attaching auras to. Since we don't play any artifacts in this deck, you can play some artifact hate cards like Collector Oof or Stony Silence. Both cards have a really simple ability that says activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. Opponents won't be able to use treasure tokens, mana rocks, their soul rings, any other artifacts they control. They are very potent and will win you a ton of games. Just be warned, if you do play cards like this, you will lose some friends. Composer of String, a 2 mana 1/3 creature with a constellation mechanic. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we get to put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. Tapped. With the amount of cards we'll be drawing in this deck, you will always have a ton of lands in your hand. Then, since we will be playing like 7 million enchantments per turn, this card will just allow you to flood the board with lands. And if this ability resolves and you control 6 or more enchantments, you can choose to put a creature card onto the battlefield from your hand instead of the land, allowing you to cheat some creatures into play. Sylvan Library, probably one of the strongest enchantments ever printed. This 2 mana enchantment will, at the beginning of our draw step, allow us to draw 2 additional cards. If we do have to choose 2 cards in our hand and pay 4 life for each card we chose that we did not decide to put back on top of our library. Sylvan Library basically allows us to draw 3 cards per turn for the cost of 8 life, which is a trait I take any day of the week. Calix, Guided by Fate, a 3 mana 2/2 enchantment creature that has the constellation mechanic. Whenever this card or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So we just get rewarded for doing what this deck wants to do anyways, play enchantments. Whenever this creature or an enchanted creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to create a copy of a non-legendary enchantment we control. This ability only triggers once per turn. In this deck, we want to be connecting with as many enchanted creatures as possible anyways, and Calix just rewards us for this by giving us copies of our strongest enchantments we control. Fantastic value card, but I couldn't fit it into the budget. Bear Umbra, a 4 mana aura card with totem armor. The creature enchanted by this will gain +2/2 and will also gain one of the strongest effects you can have on an aura. Whenever this creature attacks, you get to untap all your lands. So you can just cast this for 4 mana, swing with the enchanted creature, get to untap all your lands, and you can flood the board with more enchantments in your second main phase. And there's no limit on this. If you control 10 lands, you will untap 10 lands. Honestly, this enchantment is not that expensive and you can just buy a copy to upgrade the deck and boost its power immensely by just expanding a couple of bucks. Halvar, God of Battle. Creatures we control that are enchanted will get double strike. As I mentioned previously in this video, double strike has insane potential in this deck, allowing us to do an immense amount of damage and doubling up on all the combat damage triggers we have, since creatures will deal damage in 2 instances. At the beginning of each combat, we can move an aura of a creature we control to another creature we control. And it's not just our combat, but each combat. One round around the table will allow you to swap out some auras between your creatures, which will give you some really unique scenarios and options. This card also has a backside, but it's an equipment, and we will never play the backside of this card, so I won't be covering it. And the last card in the upgrade section, and honestly, this is the best card you can include in the deck, is Kodama of the West Tree. It's a 3 mana 3/3 creature with reach. Passively, he will give all our modified creatures trample. So this card basically guarantees you will always get combat damage through and get Ellivere triggers. And the real reason why this card is broken in my opinion is the last ability. Whenever a modified creature we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we get to search our library for a basic land and get to put it into play depth. Like I mentioned a million times by now, we do want to be connecting with as much enchanted creatures as possible. And this really simple 3-drop creature will reward us with an immense amount of ramp and card filtering, reducing the chances you will draw lands later in the game. Kodama of the West Tree is the first upgrade I'd make to the deck. It is just that good. A lot of people have also requested in my previous videos where I did an upgrade section that I give a small little overview of the swaps of the cards I'd make in the deck to actually include these upgrades. I'll flash it into the screen real quick, so pause the video if you want to see the swaps. And that's it for my hyper budget Ellivere of the Wild Court deck. If you are into hyper budget, low cost decks that perform way above the budget they are on, this might just be your next brew. If you made it this far into the video, comment a star emoji so I know you're a part of the endgame crew of these type of videos. Are there some cards that I missed or that I should have considered? Drop them in the comments below. I always reply to every single one of them. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.